Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Siedoggs Studies Chess. I am Siedoggs. I am actually playing a 9-game Lichess Tournament, so 5-0 Blitz, in which you have 5 minutes per side, no delay. And so we got into it with an e4 setup. Knights come out. Bishop actually comes out in this position so that my knight does not get pinned to my queen. I advance with our pawn here and castle, getting my king to safety. So you can see the time on the screen, which is nice. There's no risk for a pin here, but I still don't want my pawns disrupted, so I am going to block the pin as well. We're going to try to kick the bishop out here. So time-wise, we're looking pretty even in game one. Some of these games, not gonna lie, a little bit heartbreaking. Definitely made a few mistakes here and there. So it is a little bit of a learning experience as I climb up the rating ladder. So here I'm kind of trying to decide, do I want to, at this point, take the pawn? And yes, I do, because I want to disrupt that structure there. Knight jumps in. So I have to figure out what to do. Do I want their pawn coming down and having three pawns stacked on the d file? Not really. So I'm really looking for any alternatives I can find here. So if I move my knight, potentially the bishops are going to see each other. So I would prefer to retain the bishop pair if I can. We do see that the pawn on e5 is hanging, so I think that's what I was looking at. So I'm actually down almost a full 50 seconds, so they did take. So I am going to take back with the knight in this position so I don't get my queen into a tricky position. So as we move forward here, opponent's clock is still about 51 seconds, and I am down a minute 30. Knight jumps out. So if I clear the knight from in front of my queen, I can attack the knight, and it's not as easy to defend as it looks. But do I really want to put my knight in a bad spot? Not really. So I still want to align the knights so that they defend each other in some way, ideally. But I'd be disrupting that motion if I were to move the knight. But I end up choosing knight c1 here. Knight jumps in to knight f4. So I can take, and they take back with their pawn. They will have a pawn, however, that is guarded by their bishop, so that is a definite downside. And if I remember correctly, this game was a little bit rough. So currently I decided to take the bishop. I would rather that I have 2 knights on the board at this point, being up material. And so I remember this being a very difficult game to play, even being up material. Pawns are rolling in. So I'm wondering, is there any way for my knight to move so that I make it multiple attacks on the same opponent's piece here? Can I at least do a little something here about my structure? So as you can see, moving the knight to a certain position would allow the knight to be captured for free. Definitely not what I'm looking to do. So I use the queen here. Now opponent's taking advantage of the fact that I have no way to, well, in this case I just kind of took their queen, so I'm up. So it's 3 minutes to 1:23. And maybe this is why it was a little bit heartbreaking. They're definitely having me move my knight around the board. So I am up a queen and a full piece. So now it's a matter of, can I figure out how to do this? I need to be kind of careful. There are some pawns in front of the king. Stalemating could be a possibility if the king doesn't have enough space. So in this case, actually, this was not a heartbreaking game. This actually allowed me, the queen, allowed me to cut off the king, so now I have 2 queens. This game was, I remember now, I started off this tournament really well with a big first win. So now I'm trying to weave a mating net. All moves from here need to be checks, and I need to kind of figure this out. So knight takes pawn, protected by the queen. And so I'm hoping that I can find a mate in here somewhere. Check. King can still move. And mate. Oh, I was mate in 1. There we go. 18 seconds left. Good way to start the tournament. So this next game, game number 2, is definitely a little bit heartbreaking. I definitely remember this one now that I had a chance to review it. So right now I'm just waiting in the lobby. They actually have a little bit of a Swiss system, just like a normal over-the-board tournament as well. So it'll be very, very similar. In this case, it's kind of continuous. So instead of waiting for the entire round to complete for everyone's game 1, you actually move on to game 2 as soon as someone very similar to your rating band, which is slightly adjusted during the tournament, is actually queued up for you to continuously play for the entirety of the 57 minutes. So, in this particular game, I'm trying my hardest to not get caught in this trap, but turns out that I do, because I'm defending against the e4, or rather e5 pawn from check, trying to avoid the scour's mate. I need to study that a little bit more, not gonna lie. I think I need to actually push out the queen, though. I couldn't remember if it was the knight move or the pawn to g6 move, but clearly that wasn't it. So that ended in a checkmate for the opponent. So I remember there are a couple rough games that are coming my way. So this is a good one to have a very short memory on, let's just say. In a lot of ways, just like poker, you need to have a short memory, forget about your losses, concentrate on the next game ahead of you so that you can continue to play your best. So game number 3 fires up. I am playing the white pieces. So before I did play an e4 game, so now I'm going to play a little bit of a d4 game here. Right back to my bread and butter London system, bishop f4. Opponent doesn't do anything too tricky right now. Knights develop, bishop comes out. I do want to try to target this knight twice. I'd rather not give up a bishop for no reason. So opponent's thinking here 442, which is nice. And then they end up going c5, striking in the center. So I respond with c3. And they actually lock the center a little bit and force me to move my bishop. Now, fortunately, what I am able to do, and this is a really good thing, I can still attack that knight twice with the knight and the bishop in combination, forcing my opponent to take. So, in this particular case, they do decide to take that knight, seeing that. I take with the queen, instead of undeveloping my knight. So I'm preparing an escape route for my bishop as well, and charging that knight into a very key square e5. So it is attacked twice, so I get to kind of figure out, okay, and that's perfectly why I created that escape square for the bishop. And it can actually move all the way back to h2. So they're developing their bishop behind their pawns, which does block it out a little bit, but they do have a monster of a dark square bishop though, so that is something I'm going to be careful about. I'm going to move my rook. Now they do aim to take my bishop here, and I figured, well, in this particular case, that I have enough protection around that king. And I was actually kind of wrong about that. So I'm kind of debating where to move my queen. I want to keep it around to defend the g3 square, or the g3 pawn, I should say. So I am looking for a nice little pawn break, so I settle on b3 here. So I am deciding to take here because I do want to open up the file for my rook. But it turns out what I ended up doing is pushing the pawn in front of the rook here. Maybe not the most ideal thing to do, but I didn't know how else to defend that pawn, interestingly enough. So opponent plays a5, shutting down the movement of the pawn on the a file here. And I do notice now that the queen is in front of the king. However, it's on a dark square, meaning that if I had a dark square bishop, I might be able to pin it to the king and win material, but since I traded that off, I only have my light square bishop. So with the pawn blocked on the A file, I'm moving my rook to the B file, at least get on an open file. And I think my thought process was, if I can figure out how to move my bishop, I can line up my queen and maybe do some damage, at least put some pressure on the king. That's currently on the C file via the B file. So opponent is pushing pawns now in front of my king. I do want to be careful of that, but I still am going to continue with my plan. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't maybe the best plan. So now they are in fact targeting that pawn on g3 twice. So I needed to figure out exactly what to do with that. So I'm going to take and hope that the two pawns remaining in front of my king are safe enough. So about 2 minutes and 20 seconds have elapsed per player here. So I'm thinking that this is a good opportunity maybe to start an attack, maybe get a check or two in, change the move order a little bit, because 5 minutes per side isn't a lot of time, but it is. I do see some dangers here, because definitely checking the king must really occur on the b7 square here, if at all. I just don't see a different way. The center's locked. And now this may not have been the best idea with the opponent's rooks and queens staring me down here, but I needed to figure out some counterplay. So the king moves, disallowing the check. So this could get very, very dangerous for me quickly. But what I am thinking about here is if I can further limit, 1, the bishop, 2, maybe I can win that pawn, but perhaps that's a little bit of a dangerous fruit to pick here. Taking that pawn on a5 may be a little bit of a poison pawn with the rooks and the queen staring down at my king here with very little protection. I'm hoping a check might help here, but I know the king can run. So this is a little bit of a last-ditch effort here. So what I'm hoping is maybe what I can do is make a check, take out one of the rooks out of the equation, one of those 3 big pieces from staring me down. So this is an interesting kind of move here. Queen block, king moves. I'm actually up a queen for a rook. I found a check to take the potentially poisoned pawn. Check. I'm going to win the bishop. Or, in this case, bishop blocks. So I'm hoping that being up that material is just enough to allow me to incite some counterplay and have some ideas here. But I think in this case, the opponent's attack was just too strong. So what I was really hoping to do is move that bishop, but the problem is if you attack the rook in a one mover to get to attack the rook, then you're going to be in bad shape because the rook is going to move to potentially a better square, which is what I'm finding right now. So unfortunately, the idea came a little too late in the game. We're a minute 22 to 42 seconds. I have this great idea that if my queen occupies potentially the b7 square, I can push that pawn and win back some material because there's one rook towards my king, but it's not infiltrating anytime soon. The other rook is going to need to defend. In fact, I'm just thinking of it maybe as a deflection tactic as the second part. Can I get the rook to not, both rooks to not stare at my king, so that I can potentially just bluff it? But in this case, I think it would have actually worked. Now I have 10 seconds on the clock here. So this idea would have otherwise have worked if I left myself more time. Promoting to a queen. Now there is a check here, and I can I would have taken and been up a rook as well for a pawn. Unfortunately, that idea did not work out so well, but that's okay. That is chess, much in the same way as poker. You can't win them all, even though you can use some very similar tactics in a lot of cases. Be aggressive, be the one that is forcing the action, making players respond to you is a good method. It means that you are most often trying to take the initiative, and it can be very, very helpful to do stuff like that, to maintain a position, build it, maintain it. So now we're on to game 3 here. Siedoggs Studies. And I'm playing with the black pieces. So I'm getting a queen's pawn setup. So I'm going to use a London for black here. Something I'm very familiar with at the end of the day. want to do what I can. So I'm pushing that pawn, moving out my knight, preparing to castle. So again, where to put the bishop, right? Usually, if the light square bishop is outside of the pawn chain, then my dark square bishop is going to be a monster on those dark squares. But as you can see with my opponent, having their pawns occupying dark squares, they're really blunting what should be a very key piece for me. So this is not good. So most definitely, I am trying to figure out here, is it a good idea to take and open up the position on the more queen side here? So I want to prepare for that. I don't want to do that straight away, because what happens if that pawn starts coming in my territory? That's not going to be good either. So same idea, would like to knight jump into the middle. Take with the pawn. I guess I could have taken with the bishop, maybe allowed a little bit more flexibility, but it has a pro here. The goal of that also was to keep my pawns separated a little bit. If I ever have a chance to take, then I'd separate those double pawns on the e-file, which I'm hoping to do. Might just try to blast that d-file open here. So bishop moves out. I end up taking. Although that results in the loss of a pawn, it undoubles them and allows me to take the pawn here with my knight to gain it back, because it's protected by my dark square bishop. Finally, I was able to break through a little bit on the dark squares. So this was a kind of an interesting setup. I'm still +1, allowing a check here. I'd like to, since there are no pawns on the queen side for white, I get to protect that pawn first. And I was actually hoping that would be the structure that I would end up with. The problem with it is it's going to be very difficult to defend unless there's a second pawn. But the further up those pawns are of mine, even though they may be rolling pawns and potentially a pass pawn, they are difficult to protect. If the queen gets behind them, they can just kind of gobble them up. So I need to be very careful about what I do next. So I'm placing a rook behind the pawn. Since the pawns on the B and A file aren't in immediate danger, so do I want to trade the rook? Yes. I get, in response, some knight activity from them, but it's still fairly even. I'm up about 20 seconds. We've both used about 2 minutes of time here. So, interestingly enough, I think what I liked about this game is I played pretty solid. Stayed pretty consistent on the clock. Did what I could. Now I do get to decide whether to move the bishop, but it is a one mover here. Now, should I have moved the light square bishop to defend the pawn? No, I actually really like it where it is, because the pawns in front of the king could just kick it back out again and I'd be wasting a move. So my dark square bishop, I do move there for a one move attack, and they do move the rook in response, and that's the only square that they can move to. So now we're in a position where we need to make some sort of move or advantage here, try to play for a win if I can. Opponent takes the free pawn. I did not actually have it defended properly, but my goal is a little bit more maneuverability at this point. Now I'm still protecting that pawn that is in front of the opponent's queen with my queen, but that's a very precarious situation. So I decided to move the bishop back to target the knight. Where's the knight going to move? I might have enough roadblocks here that I'm hoping that putting the pawn there on the second file or second rank is going to be good for me. So about 211 to 155 here. A little bit of maneuvering, not really sure what to do. Opponent defends. Can I deflect the queen? They've actually cut off the circulation by doing that, so I'm not able to see that pawn anymore with my queen. So I make the executive decision here to kind of let it die. It served its purpose. I wish it could have just made it up the board a little bit further. But is it possible for me to find a good position, maybe still defend it, maybe put that pawn under attack there? Sure. So now I'm down almost 50 seconds. They're stacking their pieces on the semi-open file for them with their, and then as it turns out, as I was maneuvering, just didn't see it, blundered my queen, ended the game with 56 seconds. A little bit of a tough loss. Pretty dead even, lots of maneuvering during that game. You can see my face is a little bit frustrated. It's hard when you play that hard and lose a piece, but again, you gotta have short-term memory. Just like at the poker table, you have to forget about the losses. Yes, leave if you're losing too much money or something, but have a short memory. Forget about those losses. Continue to play well, play solid. Getting a little bit more caffeine here. We're about halfway through the 57 minutes, so we're at about the 27-minute mark. And most definitely this has not been very ideal. So, funny thing, this is the game where, oddly enough, I don't know why, opponent resigned. I don't know what the trick here is if they just want to get, if they don't want to lose to a player that's nearly 200 rating points below, if they don't want to actually lose points, or if they're considering other things. Are they playing with the black pieces and would rather not fight for a draw or for a win because the point scale gives you 2 points for a win? I mean, is that possible? Sure. So now I'm playing again with the black pieces. Dennis Vet. And so I'm beginning with a king's pawn opening. Knight is not pinned because the pawn is still on the d file. So my question is, where do I put my bishop for good use? If I put it outside of the pawn chain, what I risk is having that queen or knight pinned to the queen without really any other recourse, especially if the knight on c6 is removed. Removes a potential defender of the position and damages the pawn structure on the queen side. So opponent develops a second knight, castle. Or at least I think I castle here. Yep, I my castle because I figure I could always move that pawn out, and I did not know if I wanted to block in my dark squared bishop there, especially inside of the pawn chain. So now we're gonna try a little bit of a gambit here. We can see is if I push that pawn, it would attack the knight, and the knight would need to move. The bishop on the queen side is also in a position where it's blocking the natural square that the knight would like to go to. So I think that has some merit as well. So I'm kind of just deciding between taking and pushing here. So taking might not be a great idea, right? Not only do I double my pawns, allow it to be taken, the queen staring at it, the knight staring at it. So it has one more defender or attacker for the opponent than a defender, so I decide to push. No, it hasn't happened yet. I didn't see anything wrong with it either. I was kind of deciding on my opponent's time what to do there too. I'm going to have two protected pawns in the center of the board, locking the center as well. So what I notice right now is those knights moving puts me in a position where if they start attacking on my king side, my pieces are out of position. They're not in a great spot. So I want to try to figure out how to do this. So in my case, bishop moves back, knight moves in. Knight is protected by bishop here. Gets kicked out, but I get a nice little fork. Beautiful. Sometimes when the opponent goes to kick out your pieces, they intend to make you move it, but they don't always consider where are you moving it to. So I take. I do not see a way to rescue the knight. I'm going to leave it to die. I check it one more time, but pretty much gets taken. But leaving it there is actually better. If I leave it there, the opponent can't develop another piece by taking it. But I think that's what I end up doing. Oh no, that's why I do leave it to die, I think. Because I get a free move. Get rid of that bishop sniping me down there too. So now that I've traded and I'm now currently up in exchange, rook for knight. It's a little dangerous to move my knight there because I might just have to move it back. So takes. Now here's, I believe, where I got into trouble. I didn't know exactly how to kick out the... I definitely lost the knight. That was not great. So now I go being up in exchange to losing a knight. I just, for some reason, just didn't see it with a minute 30 left on the clock. So now I would like to kick out the rook, but it's just going to get a little dangerous for me. Rook gets defended. It can still take the pawn on the A file. Is there anywhere I can go with my rook here? No, because the queen's in danger. Checks, captures, attacks. Is there a great place to move it? No, not really, but it's still even. I'm down a full minute. Is there anything that I can do? I just have, I think, just too many undefended pawns. So unfortunately, I make the wrong choice here. I can't take the rook. But I'm being attacked actually by two pieces on the G7 square right now. And I'm hoping to check the king, but I didn't quite see that it was mate. So a little bit of a tough loss here. But this is right here, right where it starts to turn around a little. So I'd say right now, it's been about fairly even. It was nice to get a win early, really boost that confidence. I'm finding that winning your first game can be a big confidence booster. You don't have to win your first game, right? You can just try to keep a short-term memory. Keep going past your limits when it comes to certain things. But now in this next game, I'm playing with the black pieces here. A little bit of a closed structure here. Pretty difficult to navigate. So what I wanted to do is figure out where should I develop my knight given all those pawns. So take the free knight. Currently up 3, which is definitely good. Bring the bishop back. Now I could trade it, but ideally, if I could start simplifying into a winning endgame by being up material, which is what I do. But I'd rather preserve that bishop if I can, which is why I traded the knight for bishop on their end. I sacrifice, in that particular case, my knight for their bishop, but I take a long-range sniper off the board. Con of that also is queen activity for them. So now I'm looking to take some space. I'm looking for the easiest way to take space on my end. Take advantage of being up a piece. Do I take? Yes, I end up taking that. So now I stack my queen and my rook. They are looking to trap the bishop a little bit, So prophylactically, what I really like about what I did here, is I am looking to potentially trade the queen and open the space for my bishop. So you can see me debating with the pawn. Do I want to try to trade queens? Yeah, I'm up material. Let's do it. Queen is defended by the bishop. 3 minutes 43 seconds for the opponent. Opponent doesn't see it. Doesn't see their queen getting taken. They just kind of forgot about it. So great win. Out of a 5-minute game, about 1 minute 45 seconds used. We got to approximately move 23, which is pretty good. The next game starts immediately. I think we got 2 games left versus Karma. So now I'm kind of beginning a e4, c6 setup, entering against the Caro-Kann. Bishop comes out to pin the knight to the king. So now I have double pawns, but that's less of a concern because it also allows me to potentially get on that open file, which is pretty nice. I'm considering moving my knight back because there really isn't a way forward. I'm really just looking for tactics. Do I retreat the knight since it's undefended? Do I push the pawn to defend the knight? No, not really, because I'm inducing another weakness. That knight could easily get kicked out by the, let's say, the f7 pawn. So opponent comes out with the queen. They're really only, from my standpoint, only really targeting that c3 square, which is defendable. And in fact, I would really like the one of those pawns gone. Get rid of the double pawns, take something that's not such a great thing and turn it into an asset. So I'm just preparing to castle. I don't know why my opponent's bringing out their queen so early. My knight's in the middle, still could be kicked out. The bishop for them is developed to that square, so I am looking to undouble those pawns. I have enough ammunition where I can make an attack on the queen and start turning those pawns into assets. So given the attack on the queen, queen must move. I was hoping to find some sort of tactic. No knight jumps, no forks. Just very simple move castles. So I am still up +1 here as far as the evaluation goes, or rather +1 in terms of material, up a pawn. So can I take that knight? Sure. I'm still up material, so that's okay. But I'm gonna just kinda, I actually left it hang by accident, I think, there. Interestingly, I probably just should have taken it. Sometimes you live and you learn. You never really... So, I saw it. I saw it, that move. Missed it once. Ain't gonna fool me twice. You know. Won't get fooled again, right? So, takes. So time-wise, I'm doing really well. What I really like about this is I am up nearly 1:15. The opponent thought they were just going to bulldoze me, bring out their queen, set up an attack, but it turns out I just had the right combination of pieces, the right placement of pieces to avoid severe attacks. So now I have two thoughts. Moving my bishop to kind of a more active square, yes, undefended, but it's controlling a lot of the dark squares near the edge of the opponent's territory. At some point, I'm looking to snap take with the pawns in the center, open things up, make those pawns into full assets, protected past pawns. It's possible. So I end up doing that actually before. And then in fact, what I ended up figuring out was if I push the pawn as well, the pawn is now protected. Knight must move. A normal development square for the knight is now blocked. Knight h5 is now blocked, which is a traditional spot to attack that bishop, which is also undefended. So when the knight moves there, what I realize is I could take with the bishop takes, and then they have one more attacking piece than I have. So I'm going to add an attacker, kick that knight around again. Aren't a lot of places for that knight to go, honestly. So interestingly, with the opponent having a minute 5, I think I really underestimated the attacking power of the rook, the open rook on, or semi-open rook with the pawn in front of it on the h-file, and the queen bishop battery. I ended up snap taking the knight that was hanging because I was like, okay, even if they push the pawn, even if they bring out the rook or something like that, they don't have a mate yet. But queen comes out, attacks a couple different pieces, and then I actually don't see mate there. I brought the bishop back, but the bishop does not prevent the queen and the rook on the h-file from just mating my queen, or my king. I think now we're down to the last game. Thanks for tuning in. We got one more game left for you. And I'm again playing with the black pieces. So this was as you can see, a little bit of a grueling tournament. Some ups, some downs, some checkmates that I need to learn to defend against a little bit better. So e4, e5. Queen comes out hoping to have some bad intentions. But I'm going to kind of develop here to prevent the bishop and the queen from teaming up. This is a good square to develop my knight to, honestly. And so when the opponent pushes c3 here, what I find interesting about it is that it blocks the development of the knight. The bishop is still trapped. So the bishop comes out, even though that's okay. I don't mind that because, in a sense, if they take, I take with the bishop, retain the bishop pair. So now, if they're not successful towards where the queen is on the f-file, they would like to take in the center. Make me choose here. So they are putting some pressure on. So I move my rook to defend. Takes. And I get a nice little fork of the queen and the bishop. from that position, and I maintain high flexibility to not disrupt my pawn structure and place a pawn in front of my active bishop. So when that knight evacuates, and it turns out that I snagged the bishop for free, the knight comes out to attack it, but they leave their queen open, hesitate for a second, and take. So now I'm up a queen for a knight, up +9 actually with the total material. So hey, if you're up a queen, use your queen. But a good check here, because the bishop is out. Knight comes back to defend, from finally moving from its original, from the G1 square. Opponent castles, and that's fine. I still got plenty of material here. So this was an interesting little setup. Needed to be careful of back rank mate. I'm still up enough material that taking is probably fine. But I do get my bishop out of the way so that the rook on a8 defends against back rank mate here when I eventually take. Temporarily, what's going to happen is their rook is going to exist on the open e file, but I'm okay with that. I can figure out a way to trade it, which is kind of the current game plan. Trade down, being up pieces, up a queen. They need to deal with that. It doesn't matter that my bishop is hanging, because they must deal with the threat of the rook. So they do take that open file. Get to move my bishop back. It's all good. Now what's great here is that I can still move the H pawn to H6 to allow a little bit of room for that bishop to come back again. I'm up so much material that it just makes sense to consolidate. I'm doing pretty well on time. I'm doing a lot of the thinking, but I'm no worse than 30 seconds behind. 310 to 237. Queen slides back. Knight can't really attack all that much. I don't care about a pawn. I've been setting up this whole time. Queen back to d7. Rook. Trade off that last remaining rook. Here we go. I believe this was the last game too. So what I'd like to find are a series of moves that help me win some material, because even though it's possible, I'm not really great at checkmating with random pieces. Bishop, bishop, queen. Sure, I can mate with a king and queen, queen and rook, all that good stuff, but there's pawns in the way. I want to just make it clean, so I can still continue to take material. And my goal here is to cut off the king with the bishops. Check with the queen. Up 2 minutes, or same time, 2 minutes and 13 seconds per. I don't mind if a piece ends up in front of their king, because I can still defend it and move it. I can win more material. I get a discovered check using the queen bishop combo. Couldn't figure out with the time though how to deal with the knight. Could actually trap the knight, but the way I figure is if that pawn comes up, the knight either grabs it or it just goes. I mean, being a similar amount of time, what I decided to do was very simple. Check. check take. And eventually cut off the king. Check. So I ended up checking the king and allowing that pawn to move. Almost there. King still has breathing room. We're going to roll those queens. Opponent resigns with mate in 1. So hey, thank you for joining in. This has been a fun 9 games to go over, a little bit long, but it definitely has been great to review something in total, even if I do the voiceover here. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.